This AI stuff, huh? Specifically, this situational awareness report. The excerpt you sent over from Leopold Ashenbrenner. It's a lot.
It's definitely gotten people talking, that's for sure. Ashenbrenner, he was at OpenAI, right? And he basically lays out this, prediction, I guess, for where AI is going.
And it's got that kind of like national security briefing vibe mixed with Silicon Valley rumors all at the same time. So for people listening, what are the big things to pay attention to in this report?
I think the core of what Ashenbrenner is saying is this idea of counting the ohms, these orders of magnitude.
Okay, so break that down a bit. Counting the ohms, what does that even mean?
Basically, he says you can get a sense of where AI is headed by looking at how fast three things are growing. It's like you've got the raw computer power, right? Then how good the algorithms are at using that power, and then how we're like unhobbling AI, giving it more and more freedom to actually use its intelligence.
So it's not just about shoving more data into AI, it's about AI becoming smarter, more resourceful on its own.
Right, exactly. And he uses the jump from GPT-2 to GPT-4 as this example. In just a few years, it was like, boom, huge jump in what AI could do. Like almost going from a preschooler to a, pretty smart high school student.
Which is already crazy impressive, to be honest. But Ashenbrenner, he doesn't stop there, does he?
Oh, no, not at all. He takes it way further. He's saying, and a lot of AI people agree with him, by the way, that we're on track for another jump, just as big as that last one, by, get this, 2027. And this time, we're talking artificial general intelligence, AGI.
So this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because now we're not just talking about AI writing you a song or whatever.
Yeah.
This is AI that could potentially think like a human.
Yeah, and this is where it gets a little, spooky maybe, because even the experts, the people building this stuff, they constantly underestimate deep learning. Like every year they'll be like, no way deep learning can do that. And then bam, next year it can.
So what you're saying is this 2027 prediction, it might even be like too slow. Could it happen sooner?
Oh, it's definitely possible. Think about it. Remember when the internet first came out? How wild that seemed. Now we're ordering pizza, having video calls, all this stuff that used to be like sci-fi. This exponential growth, it sneaks up on you. What's impossible one day is just normal life the next.
And with AI, this isn't just, about faster internet or whatever.
Yeah.
This has huge implications. Jobs, global security, the whole shebang.
Absolutely. And that brings us to this big problem Ashenbrenner talks about, the data wall.
Data wall. Okay, that sounds ominous.
It kind of is. Basically, we're running out of data to train these AI models. You can't just keep making them bigger forever, It's like, imagine trying to teach someone everything by showing them every YouTube video. Eventually, they've seen it all, right? They need something more.
That makes sense. But doesn't Ashenbrenner suggest that AI might be able to get around this data wall problem?
He does. He brings up this example of AlphaGo, the AI that learned to play that super complicated Go game. First, it learned by copying how humans play, but then it got crazy good, not by watching more humans, but by playing against itself. Like it started making its own training data.
So instead of relying on us for data, AI could just start teaching itself.
Yeah.
Learning things we might not even understand.
Exactly. And that's the big question, right? What happens when AI starts making its own massive data sets, its own information? Could that lead to some kind of intelligence explosion? And would we even be able to understand it at that point?
AI teaching itself. Wow. That's both fascinating and a little creepy, honestly. But if this data wall thing is as real as Ashenbrenner says it is, maybe AI has to learn how to teach itself if it wants to keep getting smarter.
Right. That's exactly it. And it's not just about how much data there is. Even if we could feed AI all the data in the world, Ashenbrenner says there are still things holding it back. Limitations in how it's built,
Like, what do you mean? What's stopping AI from becoming even more powerful?
So he talks about these three big breakthroughs. He calls them unhobbling breakthroughs. Basically, things that could remove the limits on AI, let it reach its full potential, like taking the training wheels off, right?
Okay, yeah, now I'm really interested. Let's hear about these breakthroughs. What's the first one?
The first one is, he calls it the onboarding problem. And it's kind of like, imagine you hire this amazing new employee, super smart, right? But they just walked in the door. They don't know how your company works, haven't met everyone, haven't read all the important stuff.
So no matter how smart they are, they can't really do their job well until they're all caught up.
Exactly. And Ashenbrenner is saying that right now, even the smartest AI is kind of like that. It needs more context, more information. He thinks that if we can find a way to give AI access to way more data, like millions of times more than what it has now, that could change everything.
So instead of just having these little pieces of data, it'd be like giving AI the full picture. All the background info, everything connected.
Right. And that leads to the second breakthrough, which is thinking longer. What if AI could think about something for like weeks, months even, instead of just these little bursts, you know?
Whoa. So instead of just a chatbot giving quick answers, it could be like this master strategist working on these incredibly complex problems that could change fields like, I don't know, medicine, engineering, everything.
Exactly. Ashenbrenner says that this test time compute, the time AI has to think, it might be even more important than just feeding it more data.
That's wild. But wouldn't that take like a ridiculous amount of computing power?
It would. But remember, everything's growing so fast, what seems impossible now might be easy in a couple of years. And that actually leads into the third breakthrough, which it seems kind of simple when you say it out loud, but...
Go on, tell me. What is it?
Yeah.
This third super important breakthrough.
Give AI access to computers the same way we use them, let it use the internet, run software, all that. Ashenbrenner even talks about AI joining Zoom meetings, writing code, like a real coworker.
Yeah, are you serious? AI colleagues. I can barely handle the ones I've got now. But seriously, imagine having an AI teammate that can just crunch data, write reports, all that, while you do other things. That's insane.
It's a huge change, but Ashenbrenner says it's not that far-fetched. He even calls it like having a drop-in remote worker. And when you combine that with being able to think for a long time and having tons of information, you've got AI that can do things we thought only humans could do.
So these three breakthroughs, right? Context, long-term thinking, and actually using tools. It's like bridging that gap between what AI could theoretically do and what it can do in the real world, in our world.
Yeah, you got it. And that gets to the core of what Ashenbrenner is saying. He thinks that with these unhobbling changes, plus the fact that computers and algorithms are getting better all the time, that big jump we talked about, like from GPT-2 to GPT-4, he says that's probably going to happen again by 2027, maybe even sooner.
So this future where we have AGI, it's not sci-fi anymore. It could be just a few years away.
Yeah, and while nobody has a crystal ball, the trends Ashenbrenner's talking about, they're pretty clear. And the thing is, AGI isn't the end of the story. It's more like the beginning.
What do you mean? What happens after AGI?
That's the question, isn't it? And this is where Ashenbrenner's report goes from, super interesting to kind of scary. He says AGI isn't the finish line. It's more like the starting line of something he calls the intelligence explosion.
Okay, intelligence explosion.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, that sounds a little intimidating. What does that even look like?
Okay, so imagine this. Millions of AI, researchers, right? Working all the time, no sleep, no breaks, sharing information, making discoveries at a speed we can't even imagine. Ashenbrenner thinks AGI could make decades, maybe even centuries worth of progress in just 1 year.
That's a lot to process. It's like hitting fast forward on the evolution of intelligence itself.
Right. But here's the thing, and Ashenbrenner brings this up too. This intelligence explosion brings up this whole other problem.
Yeah.
How do you control it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If it's moving that fast, how do we even keep up, let alone control it?
Exactly. The same things that make AI so powerful, this ability to learn and change so quickly, also make it really hard to control. It's like, how do you put the brakes on something that's constantly rewriting its own code, changing its own goals even?
It's like we're building a rocket, but we forgot the steering wheel and the brakes. We know it's going to go fast, but we have no idea where it'll end up. And Ashenbrenner, he doesn't sugarcoat this, does he? He talks about some pretty intense possibilities.
He definitely doesn't. He says this tech could completely change how countries interact with each other, how wars are fought, even just how society works, and all within a few years, not decades. He compares it to when we went from the atomic bomb to the hydrogen bomb super fast, going from powerful to world-changing almost overnight.
Which makes me think, if this stuff really could be that powerful that quickly, shouldn't we all be paying attention? I mean, this isn't just about the future of technology anymore, right? This is about the future of, everything.
It is. And that leads to Ashenbrenner's big idea for what to do about all this, his solution. And to be honest, it's a little bit unnerving itself. He says that the U.S. government, they're going to have to do what they did with the Manhattan Project, but for AI. A huge top-secret project to try and control this tech before it's too late.
So instead of scientists working together openly, we're talking about governments and maybe even the military, controlling the most powerful technology in the world. That seems risky.
It is a risk, and it shows how tough this whole thing is. On one hand, you want open research, collaboration, all that, but then the more powerful AI gets, you start thinking, maybe someone should be keeping an eye on this. It's a tough balance.
So what are we supposed to do? I mean, the average person listening to this, it's a lot to take in. What's the takeaway here?
Honestly, Ashenbrenner's report is a giant wake-up call. This isn't just about some tech stuff happening in the background. This is a huge turning point for society, for all of us. We need to be talking about this, asking tough questions, making sure our leaders are being honest with us about what's going on. The future of AI, it's not decided yet. What we do, the choices we make right now, that's what's going to shape how this all turns out.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. We've gone from talking about AI writing poems to, like, the feat of humanity, all in one conversation.
It's a lot, right? And we're not even done yet. We talked about what happens if we get to AGI, but Ashenbrenner, he goes even further. He says AGI, that's not the end goal. It's more like the starting point.
Okay, so where do we go from there? What happens after AGI?
So buckle up, because this is where it gets really wild. Ashenbrenner calls it the intelligence explosion.
Intelligence explosion. Yeah, that sounds intense. Like, what does that even look like in real life?
Yeah.
Give me the sci-fi version.
Okay, so picture this. Millions of these AI, researchers, right? But they're working nonstop. No sleep, no complaining, just constant progress, sharing data, making discoveries faster than we can even comprehend. He's basically saying AGI could do in a year what might take us humans decades, centuries even, to figure out.
Yeah, that's a lot to wrap my head around. It's like hitting fast forward on evolution itself, but for intelligence.
Right. But here's the thing, and Ashenbrenner brings this up. When you have something that smart, that fast moving, the big question becomes, how do you control it?
Yeah, that's what I keep coming back to. If it's learning and changing that quickly, how do we even keep up, let alone steer it in the right direction?
Exactly. And the crazy part is, the things that make AI so powerful, this ability to learn and adapt, those are the same things that make it so hard to control. I mean, how do you put limits on something that can rewrite its own code, change its own goals?
It's like, we're not just building a rocket without a steering wheel. We're building one where the rocket itself can decide where it wants to go. And Ashenbrenner, he doesn't exactly shy away from the potential consequences here, does he? He paints a pretty stark picture.
No, he doesn't. He says this tech could completely change global politics, how wars are fought, even just the basic structures of society, and not in some distant future, but in the next few years. He keeps coming back to this comparison to the atomic bomb, right? How quickly we went from that to the hydrogen bomb. The point being, we could go from powerful technology to world-changing technology practically overnight.
It's kind of terrifying, honestly. And it makes you wonder, if this really could happen that fast, shouldn't everyone be paying attention? This isn't some abstract science fiction problem anymore. This is about the future of, well, everything.
It really is. And that brings us to Ashenbrenner's big idea, his proposed solution. And it's a bit radical. He says the U.S. government, they're going to have to do what they did with the Manhattan Project, but for AI, this huge centralized effort to control this technology before it gets out of hand.
So instead of scientists all over the world working together, sharing ideas, we're talking about like government labs, top secret research, that kind of thing. Doesn't that seem a little, I don't know, risky?
It's definitely a gamble. And it highlights this really tricky balance with AI. On the one hand, open research is usually a good thing, right? More ideas, faster progress. Yeah. But with something this powerful, it's natural to think maybe someone should be keeping a close eye on things. It's a tough call.
It really is. So where does that leave us? The average person listening to all this, what are we supposed to do?
I think the biggest takeaway from Ashenbrenner's report is that this isn't just some tech issue happening in the background. This is a huge turning point for society, and we all need to be a part of the conversation. Ask the tough questions. Don't be afraid to demand some transparency from our leaders. The future of AI, it's not set in stone. What we do right now, the choices we make, they matter. They're going to shape how this all plays out.
It's a lot to think about. Ashenbrenner, he really throws us for a loop, but in a good way, I think. It's a serious wake-up call. And on that note, I think we've given everyone plenty to chew on for today. From Count of the OMs to the intelligence explosion, it's been quite a deep dive. The main thing to remember, though, is that the future of AI, it's not written yet. We all have a role to play in